We're in the information age, but facts are in short supply. Reject the noise, ask bold questions, and seek the truth with FBI whistleblower and common sense extremist Steve Friend. This is the American Radicals Podcast.
It is the American Radicals Podcast, and welcome to it. It's Wednesday, March 11th, 2026, and today we're going to be drilling down into a new whistleblower who's come forward from Customs and Border Protection, and going to go all into the dysfunction that might be part of that organization, which ties to further dysfunction with the Department of Homeland Security, because they still have a shutdown going on, whether or not you're aware of it or not. Yep, it's still ongoing. FISA is up for reauthorization soon, and it could be tied to DHS funding. The Supreme Court is looking at a case about drug users and guns, and the DOJ is continuing to fight the pro-life movement. So let's get after it. We all enjoy stability, right? Nobody likes to live through an earthquake. That's awful. That's terrible. But when there is dysfunction and chaos, that's when real evil can kind of slip by your awareness because you're preoccupied with things that are going on. You have to triage what you have to deal with first. Look, if you're a kid and you want to have a cookie before dinner, do you walk up to mom when she's got all of her mental faculties able to concentrate on your question? Or do you wait for the pot to be boiling over and she's dealing with a smoke alarm going off and you go, hey, mom, can I have an extra cookie before dinner time? She's not going to be able to drill down onto that. She'll give you her authority right there, right? That's just common sense. My son, my older son, good student, but, we all make mistakes. Forgot homework was due. Well, we're going to school. We got to leave in 10 minutes. Do you think he put his best foot forward on that homework assignment? I think that he just slopped whatever he could together in order to get a finished product so he could turn it in and not get a zero. Chaos, dysfunction. Try to do the best that you can under those situations. Look, if you're on a battlefield, somebody takes an injury, you have to put the tourniquet on it. Are you really worried about what the scars are going to look like when they get sewn back up? No, you're just trying to stop the bleeding. When there's chaos and there's dysfunction, you do what you can to bring the temperature down, but are you making the best decisions, or can things slip by your awareness? So through that sort of lens today, let's look at a bunch of different stories that I have connected to Department of Homeland Security and the Department of Justice. So we can begin with a piece that came over from Kaylin Deese, writer over at the Washington Examiner, who brought forward some news about a new whistleblower who's emerged within the Customs and Border Protection. And I think it sort of contributes to the dysfunction that we're seeing within our federal government, where true despotism lives in dysfunction. So the headline, whistleblower says that CBP chief targeted senior staff over, quote, political vendettas. Now, the Customs and Border Protection chief, he's the commissioner, his name is Rodney Scott. So several of Scott's deputies were reassigned by Kristi Noem and Corey Lewandowski. And it appears, at least reading through this whistleblower disclosure and this news piece over at Washington Examiner, that Rodney Scott was getting very paranoid. He believed that Kristi Noem, Corey Lewandowski were sort of remaking the agency in their own image. They're removing his direct subordinates, his number two, his chief of staff, those sorts of people, and installing people who were more, responsive to the Kristi Noems and Corey Lewandowskis. And you understand, in a large organization, not everybody's priority is going to align with everybody else's. Kristi Noem, she's a political appointee. They come and they go, Hobbs. They come and they go. And Rodney Scott, maybe he's more of a career entrenched, ensconced bureaucrat and is looking over his agency and is kind of worried that the new boss might be making some changes that don't align with what he views as successful for his bureaucracy. But what is the actual response that you have here if it's a functional organization? Well, You have to raise those concerns and say to the Secretary of Homeland Security, here's the case that I have for my people versus the people you've installed. But ultimately, accountability is going to go to the top of the chain. And if Kristi Noem or Corey Lewandowski wanted that call to be made, it's going to be their decision to make. And you have to actually follow orders because what they're proposing isn't necessarily illegal, immoral, unethical, out of step with your oath of office or the Constitution, right? But that's not what this guy did, Rodney Scott. Apparently, because he's the commissioner of the Customs and Border Protection, the Office of Professional Responsibility, OPR, think of that as the internal affairs for Customs and Border Protection, falls directly underneath his supervision. Now, he's not supposed to be involved in it so intimately that he can control everything going on, but essentially that's what he did. And he ordered the OPR for Customs and Border Protection to open up investigations of the people who Kristi Noem and Corey Lewandowski installed around him. And that's an abuse of power. It kind of shows some dysfunction that's going on there. And there's a little bit more actually that went into it because apparently also Rodney Scott tried to set up Greg Bovino, who was the guy originally out in Minneapolis with those enforcement and removal operations, who was removed in favor of Tom Homan to pull a Dunkirk and say, oh, we're all done here in Minneapolis, even though there's 90,000 illegal aliens still on the street. Well, Rodney Scott tried to set up Greg Bovino with a perjury trap because a judge in Chicago was listening to a lawsuit, and this lawsuit was alleging that Customs and Border Protection was violating the rights and it's a communist enclave, so we have to do everything we can. And essentially what the judge said was everybody who's in uniform for Customs and Border Protection has to wear a body camera. Okay, judge's order. I actually don't have a problem with that. I think that more transparency is better. And then right after that, there was a memorandum issued at the instruction of Rodney Scott that said that, well, people who were on Greg Bovino's protection detail did not comply with the judge's order. Now, they did because the actual judge's order said if you're wearing a uniform, which means you're more intricately involved in the ERO, the enforcement removal operation, you got to wear a body camera. But somebody who's on the protective detail for Greg Bovino, they're just handling security for that guy, they're in plain clothes. They're not in uniform. Ergo, the judge's order didn't affect that person, didn't impact them, didn't apply. But the memorandum being issued by the Office of Professional Responsibility at the behest of the Commissioner of Customs and Border Protection tried to set Greg Bovino up for an allegation that he lied when he testified to the judge and said, hey, judge, everybody's wearing the body cameras. We're good to go. We're complying with your order. So there's quite a bit of dysfunction, according to this whistleblower, at least. This report emerged over again at the Washington Examiner. It's lengthy, but it's actually worth going into because it shows how the $300+ billion Department of Homeland Security, which was formerly under leadership of Kristi Noem, is just covered in dysfunction. And when there is, in fact, dysfunction, that's when things slip past your attention. They fall in the cracks. And the despots that are the career bureaucrats might be able to abuse their authorities and get the levers of power that they've been able to accrue over the years in order to weaponize the institutions that you expect and you actually fund as an American taxpayer to do the job, to fill those charges that we have a pesky, dusty document that itemizes, particularly Department of Homeland Security. I mean, it emerged post 9/11, but theoretically is supposed to be doing the things like ensuring border sovereignty, which the American people have a social compact that says they're supposed to do for us at a federal government level, but they're not doing it. Well, they might not be doing it also because they don't have money, according to the Washington Post. So let's cover down on the shutdown that still continues. Now, it's called the shutdown that everyone has forgotten. Well, yeah, because nobody in regular America cares about the federal government that much. It doesn't really impact our lives too consequentially. But the shutdown that everyone has forgotten, the HS shutdown began February 14th, almost a month ago. Now, immigration enforcement got in a big, giant cash infusion from the One Big Beautiful Bill. It was $170 billion that the Trump administration passed that One Big Beautiful Bill, and both houses of Congress passed it on through. It was signed by the president. So immigration enforcement is not hurting for cash, which is again, one of the few charges that the American people expect. But it's created this problem with negotiating the reopening of the Department of Homeland Security, which isn't just immigration enforcement. That's going to be things like Transportation Security Administration, the TSA, the people dressed in blue that fill you up at the airport. I mean, we really got to get them funded. You also got Coast Guard, CISA, cybersecurity in what cybersecurity infrastructure security agency. Yeah. Security twice, so it's really important. They're the guys that said that they wanted to have their jurisdiction be things that you're thinking about. They need to get funded. But the impasse right now between the Republicans and the Democrats when it comes to refunding the agency, the Department of Homeland Security, is that the Democrats say we don't like enforcement of the border because we want amnesty and we want the 50 million illegal aliens that the Joe Biden auto pen administration allowed to come into our country between January 2021 and January 2025 to stay, to become a permanent voter block, get them on the welfare doles. That's what they want, right? So they say, well, we'll fund the Coast Guard, we'll fund CISA, but we're not going to fund anything related to ICE. And the Republicans are pushing back saying, well, we need to fund everything all at once here. So negotiations are ongoing, and we'll see how long it actually goes, particularly when you have ICE with the $170 billion cash infusion. I don't really care about the rest of the sub agencies within Department of Homeland Security. They can just kind of go by the wayside as far as I'm concerned. But I am concerned about one avenue here, one aspect to reopening the Department of Homeland Security. Reopening. It's operating, but it just doesn't have funding, which means it's money that they're going to have to steal. I mean, tax from you in order to do. And that is that they're going to sneak some stuff in, right? That's what they always do. The Republicans, the Democrats, your elected betters in Congress, they sneak in that pork, right? Those little riders in those bills. They say, well, wait, are you seriously going to stand in the way of protecting our borders over this one little thing? Well, yeah, if that one little thing happens to be something like the renewal of FISA Section 702, which, if you're unaware or you haven't looked at a calendar, is up for renewal in a little bit more than a month. I believe it's April 20th, 2026. So a little bit more than a month from now. FISA 702 expires. The Republicans 2 years ago reauthorized it fully, no warrant requirements. Remember, at first, Donald Trump, candidate Trump at the time, was saying, like, you got to kill FISA. And then for whatever reason, he just reversed course and said, I don't care, just get it done, Mike. And then Mike Johnson went and passed FISA with no warrant requirement and flew on down to Mar-a-Lago, Mr. Smithers style, and said, oh, well, yes, sir, we did it, sir. But it was only a 2-year extension. Now, FISA 702, let's get a little bit nerdy because it is kind of important. What is it? It allows the federal government, the intelligence community, to collect on foreign people when they are not in the United States for intelligence purposes. But communication's two ways, right? So let's say somebody who's a representative or part of a government, a foreign government, let's say let's say they're Chinese, where the Chinese Communist Party views everyone in the country as a representative of their government. So let's say they're in China. The intelligence community is allowed to collect on their electronic communications. Goes two ways. Well, if they're communicating with an American, there's theoretically a pesky, dusty document, which includes a Bill of Rights that says the government can't just have unfettered access to that. But because it gets, as they call it, incidentally collected, now there's a giant database and there's no warrant requirement because of the FISA law that was reauthorized. So now the FBI can just go in there and look at it. No warrant required. Well, that's unconstitutional, but national security. So we're just going to let it happen. And there's also a thing called parallel construction. Parallel construction means that you know what you need, but you're going to try to make it look legitimate, even though you got it through illegitimate means. So let's do a theoretical. Let's say that the NSA is doing intelligence collection. And when they happen to do an incidental collection of an American, they find out that that American has a bunch of dope in their car and they're going to be at a certain place in a certain time. Well, then they just report it to the local police and tell them, hey, you might want to be in a certain place at a certain time. Don't ask how you got this information. In fact, just say you're there in a random security sweep. Well, you're randomly there. The canine drug sniffing dog is there, and he just happens to boop, pops on it. Now, most Americans are going to say, well, I don't care about some dirty drug dealer, but I'm giving an extreme example. They knew the answer ahead of time. Law enforcement's supposed to be difficult. And when you're continually existing in a time right now when law enforcement just gets to pick which laws it wants to enforce or how it wants to interpret those laws, and we'll get to an example of that in a little bit, that's a problem. So there's been a proposal now, a bipartisan proposal from Dick Durbin, Democrat, Illinois, Mike Lee, Utah. It's called the SAFE Act, not the SAVE Act. I know everybody's hot and bothered about that one, and it's never going to pass because John Thune is Mitch McConnell, just a little bit taller. But the SAFE Act, headline: the SAFE Act is an imperfect vehicle for real Section 702 reform. Now, we drill down into what incidental collection are, which they do a pretty good job of explaining. And again, I will put the link to this piece in the comments for today. No warrant requirement for the incidental collection. What people should know is that a couple years back, 2021, the FBI abused FISA over 3 million times. So the SAFE Act, as it's been proposed here by Senator Lee, Senator Durbin, it would require a warrant before the FBI looked at that incidentally collected material. Okay, how do you get a warrant? Well, you have to originally have probable cause to believe that the subject of the search warrant committed a crime. You can't just say, like, look at that guy, we want that stuff, we're going to get it. Okay, that's good. Secondly, they also have the parallel construction taken down. So if you actually present your case, you have to say where you originally got it from. And in the drug case theoretical that I presented earlier, you would have to say the NSA tipped us off and it was an incidental collection situation. Ergo, it was an illegal action on our part. So that would tamp down on the parallel construction angle too as well. It would also end the data broker loophole. What's data broker loophole? Do you have a Gmail account? You know, if something's free, it means you're the product, right? Google's collecting your data because you have a Gmail account. They can sell that data to basically anybody because you clicked agree. That includes the federal government. The federal government can buy your data right now. The SAFE Act would say, no, we're not going to let American taxpayers fund their own demise to the extent that the federal government can steal tax money from the taxpayers and then use that money to buy their data so we can collect on them. So that would be done away with. All right. Now I wanted to connect it to Department of Homeland Security. We're in a shutdown, right? What are the odds that our elected betters within the halls of Congress, those hallowed halls, the United States Senate, the United States House of Representatives, that they're going to try to sneak Section 702 renewal completely in the Department of Homeland Security reauthorization, the refunding of DHS with no changes at all? Seriously? You're going to let our national security be at risk? I mean, people could be boarding planes with bombs in their shoes right at this very instant over what? What, some sort of ridiculous law that you care about? Don't you care about our national security? The SAFE Act isn't perfect, but it's better than we currently have. But I don't think that the elected betters who we have will take this up, and they will, in fact, use the dysfunction that is a DHS shutdown to say, we got to fix the problem. We got to refund DHS to save America. Why are you drilling down into the details? Create the chaos. Mom's got a pot boiling over. Little boy walks up and says, Mom, can I have a piece of candy? Yeah. I don't care. I'm dealing with this. I'm putting this fire out. Because in the dysfunction is where you get the real despotism. Now, I mentioned the interpretation, the overly broad interpretations or novel interpretations of laws. I've got a pretty gross example of that, and it ties to a Supreme Court case that is currently under consideration, and it involves guns and drugs, and it's the FBI, guys. Terrorism. So from the New York Times, at one point a newspaper, Headline: Supreme Court appears skeptical of law banning drug users from owning guns. Well, that's actually a good thing. But let's show about some of the dysfunction that exists to begin with and how true despotism and tyranny can exist when the pot is boiling over. Now, this entire case is about this guy. His name is Ali Hamani, and it goes back like 3.5 years. Now, the allegations from our federal government was that Ali Hamani, he's of Iranian descent, and the FBI Joint Terrorism Task Force was all over him. The allegations were that he was sending money back to Iran, and Iran right now is the hot subject, but in 2022, not so much. But he's funding the IRGC. Okay, maybe not. Ali Hamani has said, no, I'm a secular Muslim. I'm not like this devout guy. I send money back home. All right, prove it one way or another. Then Ali travels to Iran to go visit, I guess. And while he's there, his mother, not him, mind you, his mother, she loves herself some Iran. She loves herself some Soleimani, that guy that Donald Trump ordered the killing of, and everybody was celebrating. That's when the canine dog went in there and took him out, and he died like a dog. This is one of the reasons that the allegation came out that Iran was trying to assassinate Donald Trump. Well, Ali's mom really likes Soleimani, so she's not the best character. I don't think I would get along with her really well. And then when they were traveling back and forth to Iran, we had this whole thing happen with coronavirus, and flights got canceled. So the allegation came forward from federal agents, hey, you're sending money to Iran, your mom likes Soleimani, and then you altered your travel schedule to probably throw us off the trail. It had nothing to do with your flight getting canceled. So they went and searched his house, saying, you're a terrorist. We have a probable cause to believe it. We want that evidence. And they searched. What did they find? No evidence of terrorist activity. They asked him, do you have any weapons? That's a security issue. That makes sense. Yes, I have a gun in a safe. He lives in Texas, mind you. He's from America, born and raised here. And then he says, I also smoke marijuana like every other day. That's a violation of federal law. And the Joint Terrorism Task Force, look, they don't have a terrorist, but they got to get an arrest. People don't really read the press releases as we drill down into on this program all the time. So you're going to get your press release, right? You're going to say that Iranian gets arrested by the Joint Terrorism Task Force in Texas. Pump your fists. Pom-poms everywhere, right? We just saved America from a terrorist. What they actually arrested him for was 922G, gun charge. It says that you are using drugs, you can't have a gun. Now, the Supreme Court is taking this up, and they're saying, well, are you a drug addict? Is this a drug that's addictive? I mean, look at the founding fathers. I mean, those guys were every night getting sauced and drunk when they were negotiating and wound up writing our Declaration of Independence and eventually our Constitution. Would they be allowed to have guns? And that's sort of the premise. But in the chaos that it is this case, let's show you how actually despotic it became. So Ali Hamani gets arrested. He gets detained. No criminal history, mind you. And the Department of Justice, your Department of Justice, says we got to keep him locked up. He's a threat to national security. So for 7 months, he was detained in prison because he had weed and a gun in Texas. Now, beyond that, the Department of Justice made the case that he needed to be kept in because his mother was going to be a corrosive influence on him. That would have driven him to terrorism. He'll go do a terrorism because his mommy said so. They said also that Ali Hamani, he doesn't have a criminal history, but that makes him tailor-made to go do a terrorism. This is exactly the type of person who will be recruited to go and do a terrorism. They said, quote, the defendant's sparse record was itself a red flag. The defendant makes him a perfect fit for criminal activity that his mother advocates on her Facebook posts because his mom was saying pro-Soleimani things on Facebook. So he sat and rotted in jail for 7 months until eventually this entire indictment was overturned and he was released. And then that was it, right? No, that wasn't it. The FBI they had to make something stick. They had to justify all of the chaos, getting things spun up, right? In the federal government, things only spin in one direction, up. You got to make it bigger and bigger and bigger because that justifies the bureaucracy itself. More funding, got to get the job promotion, get those bonuses, programs getting launched, more material, more manpower. Got to spin it up. Well, this is a pretty bad hit for you, right? Well, we're going to be vindictive. We're going to refer his drug possession to the county prosecutor who charged him with the felony. So this all goes back to the Supreme Court, which is taking this up and considering the legality of this gun law, right? I mean, what is it to be addicted to drugs? And it's also created some very interesting alliances. So one more time, I'll throw it up there and show you where the alliances go on this one, which is truly bizarre. So the Department of Justice is fighting to keep this gun law in place. They have cited every town for gun safety in their briefs. That's Mike Bloomberg, former mayor of New York City, former presidential candidate. He wants to get himself some guns off the streets. The Trump DOJ is also citing leaders in the great states of California, Massachusetts, and Hawaii, all gun grabbing states. Now, in opposition, Ali Hamani, he's backed by the ACLU, also the National Rifle Association, and Hunter Biden. So some very interesting alliances here on where their identities are and what their beliefs are. Do they have any integrity on this issue? I think it's pretty clear that if you are a stalwart on the Second Amendment, that the 922G laws, they're wholly unconstitutional, and they are abused because they're novelly interpreted. They're overly broad in their interpretation of these laws. And they're also just a fallback. Hey, we kind of just wet ourselves here and embarrassed ourselves on this ridiculous case. And we're now going to make the case that a guy with no criminal history who has no allegiance to Iran because his mommy said something mean on Facebook and we're embarrassed about having done a search warrant that goes nowhere, we'll just charge him with a crime. It's chaotic, right? We just got to get handcuffs on this guy. And you wind up abusing the law, abusing the process, and abusing a person's civil rights. Because is it a feature or a bug? I think it's a feature. I think the dysfunction is actually a feature because that's when real evil gets to slip past the goalie. Now, the Department of Justice has problems. It has lots of dysfunction. We're now moving on from Department of Homeland Security to DOJ. And this is a piece over from New York Times, at one point a newspaper. And they are very, very excited to announce that 3 prosecutors running the U.S. Attorney's Office were unlawful, according to a judge. A communist judge has now ruled that the 3 prosecutors who were named to replace Alina Habba, because she was unlawfully appointed per this same judge, who is from Pennsylvania, but is weighing in on the United States Attorney's Office in New Jersey because reasons, I guess. Again, dysfunction. So there are 3 prosecutors who were installed to kind of take over for Alina Habba. And now the same judge has said they can't be there. Everything they're doing is illegal. And for a time, the judges in New Jersey were requiring defendants to acknowledge that there is uncertainty in the United States Attorney's offices who had authority to lead, and they were going to have to waive their rights to challenge what actually went on in court. They were going to say, hey, look, the dysfunction that we have atop the United States Attorney's Office, are you aware of that, defendant? Yes. Okay. In light of that, you can't now come back and appeal your case and say, hey, it was a dysfunctional office. Okay. And for a while, the defendants were having to say, okay. But now the defendants are catching on to it, or at least their attorneys are saying, like, no, I'm not going to acknowledge that. Any opportunity that I have to get my case tossed, I'm going to do it. And you're going to have legitimate cases not get prosecuted or be appealed, and probably successfully, because they'll be put in front of some communist judge like this guy in Pennsylvania who's now weighing in on the United States Attorney's Office. And this all goes back to hatred of the president, Donald Trump. He's mean, orange, literally Hitler. And you have members of the court, these guys and gals in black robes, austere members of their justice system who see fit, because they're communists, to use the power that they have to throw a whole bunch of dysfunction into the system so that it cannot operate the way that it was supposed to and the way that it's expected to by the American people who rightfully, or at least according to our law, elected a president. I'm sorry, not sorry, that you, Your Honor, don't like the president. He was lawfully elected. He's allowed to appoint who he wants to the United States Attorney's Office. There's 90 districts. He's allowed to appoint them as long as they get confirmed. And there's also further dysfunction because there's some senators, and the way that the rules of the Senate work is that if the senators don't like the appointee, then they get to somehow scrap it and say, no, pick somebody else. It doesn't say that in the pesky, dusty document, but because our Senate is happy to operate in a dysfunctional way, because the guys like the John Thunes, who are never going to pass the SAVE Act, they're happy to just see the dysfunction and to throw as many roadblocks as they can, at least get an assist on those roadblocks of a mandate that came from the American people in 2024. And also, when you create so much turmoil, that's again when the real evil slips past your attention. When the smoke detector is going off, when the alarm for the morning goes off, and you realize, oh my goodness, I haven't done my homework yet. Are you really going to put your best foot forward? No, of course not. It's chaotic. But in the chaos is when things go wrong. And the Department of Justice is doing things entirely in contravention to what the MAGA base, or at least the voters for the current president, the current occupant of the White House, sent. It was a very pro-life message. And still, the Department of Justice is pushing back. So I've got a couple pieces from Zeal, and that is the sub-agency, subsidiary of Catholic Vote. And it's all about how the Trump DOJ, the Pam Bondi DOJ, is fighting against pro-life movement. First piece, headline, DOJ moves to dismiss or pause pro-life lawsuit seeking to reinstate abortion pill safeguards. So the case is Missouri versus FDA, but it actually is Missouri, Idaho, and Kansas. They are challenging the Food and Drug Administration policy that was adopted under the Biden administration that allowed the chemical abortion drug to be prescribed through telemedicine. They want to actually require people to go in person in order to acquire the medication that's necessary to murder their baby. Now, the Department of Justice currently, this rule came through under the Biden administration, if you recall, but the current DOJ, its attorneys argued that the states lacked legal standing because they didn't demonstrate direct injury. I guess death of future citizens or current citizens, if you believe that life actually starts at conception. That doesn't reflect injury in the eyes of the Trump DOJ. Now, this is hardly the only case. There's actually a second case that involves basically the exact same thing, and Zeal again reports on it. This headline reads, DOJ asks judge to delay abortion pill restrictions. And this case actually played into first because the DOJ is saying, hey, can we just delay these lawsuits? Because we're doing currently a study of the mifepristone baby murder drug, and we just want to do a safety study on it. And once that gets done, then we can actually adjudicate this case. Of course, the study is going to take at least a year. And during that time, there will be no injury, right, to the current citizens of Kansas or Missouri or Idaho, the ones that get murdered because mom ordered the drug through the mail. We got a third one as well, because this isn't the DOJ, but the FDA, which will be doing the study, gets brought up here. Zeal, again, has this one. FDA approves a new version of abortion pill, prompting backlash from pro-life leaders. The Trump administration under fire because the FDA quietly approved a generic version of mifepristone last September. The drug is manufactured by Avita Solutions, company that openly declares its mission is to, quote, normalize abortion and make it accessible to all. Well, it's very lucrative, big pharma, right? It's a dysfunctional Department of Justice. Everybody's focusing in on this ridiculous communist judge who's over in Pennsylvania and weighing in on what's going on in New Jersey. But at the same time, the very same Department of Justice is out there saying, well, You don't have any standing here for the lives of the unborn. Just give us a little bit of more time. At the same time, I mean, Big Pharma's on the hook, right? Big Pharma is going to be contributing to the coffers of our elected officials. And we don't want to stand in their way and give them their opportunity to go after their profit margins, even if it means the deaths of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions. I believe the number is over 50 million at this point. No, no. It's a dysfunctional situation, and that's where the real evil lurks. It's really profitable to murder babies. One more from Zeal. And this one's outside of the government context, but kind of connected to it. We're talking about funding fights for Department of Homeland Security. You remember the objectively good thing where we stopped sending taxpayer dollars that were stolen, I mean tax from you, to Planned Parenthood? Planned Parenthood has pivoted. Affiliates add cosmetic services to offset funding cuts. Look, they're really mega Doppler interested in women, but really they're actually interested in their bottom line, which is why Planned Parenthood is trying to make itself a spa. There's a $100 million revenue gap. So now Planned Parenthood affiliates are starting to roll out things like Botox and dermal fillers, IV hydration drips for people who are hungover, laser hair removal, other aesthetic procedures. You got to pay for them in cash, though, because they're not really medical. And on Saturdays, clinics are repurposing their reclining chairs, normally reserved for patients who have just murdered a baby, to recover, and they are now for the IV drips. Big business, murdering babies. Why would they have to do that? Why would they have to fill that gap unless they were getting that money that was stolen? I mean, tax from you in order to do it, funding your own demise. Very much like the way the elected officials, Republican and Democrat, will say, hey, are you going to stand here in the way of reauthorizing and refunding Department of Homeland Security? We have to get it back. We have to get it back fully functioning, get those people in blue shirts so they can fill up grandma at the airport. If we don't, then there could be a threat to national security. So we need to tax you in order to fund these agencies and sub-agencies. And then also at the same time, why are you going to quibble about something like our ability to monitor your private communications so that we get that communication, and then we can just come to your house and say, hey, that gun, we don't like that. We got a problem with that. We'll come after you. It's a lot of chaos that's been tossed out. A lot of these things, and the purpose is the feature. It's not a bug, guys. Because when you have that chaotic situation, that's when real evil can emerge. When the professional wrestling match is going on and the referee is looking off to the side as somebody's screaming at him, that's when somebody slips in with the chair to hit somebody in the back of the head. The difference, that's K-fob. This is real life. So do not get distracted by the dysfunction. I know that the smoke detector is very loud. I know that morning alarm that wakes you up, but you have to be cognizant. You have to pay attention to as much as you possibly can. Do not allow the evil to slip past your guard. All right, so we have reached the end of the day for the American Radicals podcast, but I'm not going to leave you without a nice palate cleanse, completely unrelated to anything. I mean, you get these claptraps in comedy, right? Like these screeds, these Karens would go and yell at comedians. It's all for fun, guys. And this is an example of a woman just not taking herself too seriously and letting the comedian do his job of comedy. So today's palate cleanse. Asian speech pathologist.
You're Asian, yeah? What do you do? What do you do for a living here?
Oh, I'm in grad school.
Oh, you're in grad school for speech pathology. There's certain things. First word, ridiculous.
All right, guys. Thank you again for joining us today on rumble.com/amradpod and YouTube at amradpod. If you haven't already, do all those things. Like, share, subscribe. Tell a friend or 12. We're trying to grow here. And I humbly ask everybody at some point this week, head on over to Spotify, follow us there, play an episode in the background. You don't even have to listen to it. Glad to be back with you tomorrow, noontime, as always. Until then, have a great day.
You've been listening to the American Radicals podcast. Find us on YouTube, Rumble, and X at AmRadPod.